On Fanalysis, we use in-depth metrics used in fantasy sports to find the sharpest betting angles. And for that, we bring in a sports investment analyst from the Sports Grid, Jared Smith, joining us once again. Jared, well, this is a good time to start talking about futures. And one I think we like to start off with is the Saigon Award, which I feel like there's certainly a subjective element to the Cy Young Award because it's voted on by the Baseball Writers Association. So it's not just a look at the numbers. When you look at the numbers of like what Trevor Bauer did last year to win the Cy Young, he had a 1.73 ERA, but he's no longer going to be pitching in a weak offensive system or pitching against weak opponents like he did in the Central this last year. Where do you see the Cy Young in the National League landing?
Well, it's tough because usually, Steve, I agree. When we think about the futures market, you know, the goal is to get that explosive value, 30, 40, 50 to 1, and then you want to try to, you know, maybe come off of that at some point during the season if you do get positive line movement in your direction. When it comes to the awards, I think that's harder, especially in the baseball situation. Sure. I mean, I'm sure you guys have talked ad nauseum about the Hall of Fame and just how subjective it is and just how narrative-based it is. And it's not fair sometimes where guys really have good numbers, but they don't really get the recognition they deserve. I think Jacob deGrom has certainly gotten plenty of recognition. He's won 2 Cy Youngs, over the last 3 years. But I don't necessarily think that this number, despite being the shortest number on the board at plus 380, is too short for me, because I think when you look at a guy like Jacob deGrom, it's going to take a Herculean effort for someone behind him, like a Bauer, that again is now in a much more difficult division, and also pitching with also really good pitchers around him, where deGrom still is absolutely the ace of that staff, the #1 guy. It's going to take Herculean numbers from Bauer or Scherzer or one of those guys to overtake the narrative that Jacob deGrom is still the best pitcher in baseball. So despite the fact that the number is a little shorter than what I'd normally be comfortable with playing this far out from a result, I think the narrative in this case, Steve, fits what I'm going with deGrom. And he's looked great in spring. He's hitting 100 miles an hour. So certainly the proof is in the pudding with how he's pitching, but I think the narrative also fits.
All right, let's talk about win totals. Betting win totals, you always have to take into account what happened last year. But last year is such an anomaly. Do you almost have to fold in the 2019 seasons when you're looking at win totals? And do you always have to target those teams you think are going to have the high win totals?
You know, it's funny. I've actually been better, and I don't know if this is just a matter of randomness or if there's something to this. I've actually been better over the years handicapping the unders on the win totals, meaning predicting the teams that are going to be bad.
So you're rooting for the losses.
Yeah, I've actually had some success in the NFL, especially doing that. I think in baseball it's unique because, I mean, it's such a grind. Football and baseball are the two sports where I do feel like the win totals have value, because in baseball you can bet on volume and you can use the statistics as your friend. In football, you have to take into account the randomness of a very short season. So for this year's baseball win total, I think I do see some value out in the American League West. I do think a couple of those teams at the top, Oakland and Houston, are a little bit vulnerable, and I think I'm going to go for the middle tier team in this case with the Angels at 83.5 wins. I just love what they did in the offseason. Pitching was clearly their bugaboo, and I think they're not still buttoned up completely in that area, but you bring in Jose Quintana and Alex Cobb, and I think that shores up the rotation. Nobody can argue that the middle of this lineup is as good as it's going to get probably throughout baseball. Trout, Rendon, and Ohtani, who's looked phenomenal in spring training. The number's very fair. I'm basically betting on them to be just a team slightly above 500. And again, the division is a little weak out there in the West. The Mariners, the Rangers are really bad. They're going to feast on those teams. I think Oakland and Houston are a little bit more down than people think. I think the Angels can win this division, but I really like the win total.
Does it concern you, though, that the Angels haven't hit that win total for 3 years?
Yes, it absolutely does. I think, though, there is a form of regression in the positive way that I think LA is going to be due for. This is also the last year of Albert Pujols' contract, which I think is fascinating. I think there's going to be an aura of, nostalgia about what he's done in Anaheim over the years. I know it's been an up and down campaign for him, but listen, he's still one of the best hitters of all time, and he's had some good years with the Halos. And I think the middle of that lineup, and also, keep in mind, they've got this rookie from last year, Jared Walsh, love the name, by the way, who I think is going to be one of those breakout stars, continue his success from last season. So I think they've got a little bit of a good mix, young, old, and really old with Pujols. And I think it's just one of those seasons that, you know, could be one of those magical years. I'd love to see Mike Trout in the playoffs. I know that's something a lot of baseball fans, too, would like to see.
All right, well, let's talk about the big one, the World Series. Look, you win the title, you deserve to be the favorite, and right now that's exactly where the Dodgers have the best odds to win it all again. But that's kind of an easy pick. That's, you know, you're not making any money if you're betting the Dodgers to win the World Series. How far down the line do you see the odds playing into your favor for a team?
You know, I think baseball is funny because you really can't find the long shots in baseball. There's not. It's not like college basketball. We're going to see it in the tournament. You know, like where you get these Cinderellas, and even in hockey, where you get 8 seeds, like the LA Kings that one year, that can go on a run and win it all. I think because of the volume of baseball, there's really a line, and I think the line actually is in that kind of 10, 15, 20 to 1 range, where nothing below that I give a lot of credence to survive the gauntlet that is a Major League Baseball season. That being said, I do find a little bit of value with this number with the Braves at 10 to 1 because I think Atlanta has elite talent but is not being priced like an elite team. San Diego and LA, the Dodgers, are kind of gobbling up some of that equity in the National League. I think the National League East is really good. That's why I'm not going to play the Braves on the win total. That's why I'm not going to play the Braves to win the division at a very short price. They play in a very tough division. The Mets, the Phillies, obviously the Marlins made the playoffs last season, Nationals champs from a couple years ago. But I think if the Braves get into the playoffs, they have something that other teams maybe don't in the National League. The Padres have it a little bit. The Dodgers, I think, now are more pitching-based than anything else, but the Braves have the best lineup in the National League. I mean, you can say what you want about San Diego, but the Braves lineup, they had the MVP last year in Freddie Freeman. They had Ozuna, who almost won the Triple Crown. I like that lineup a lot, and they have Max Fried. And, oh, by the way, this Soroka kid, who nobody knows about because he tore his Achilles last year, I think he's going to come back mid-season, which will give them that boost when things are kind of getting rough in the dog days of summer. I don't think this number at 10 to 1 is going to be there come July, August. That's why I like the Braves at 10 to 1.
And let's be honest, the only reason that gap between the Braves and the rest of the division is getting smaller is because the rest of the division is getting better. It's not that the Braves are getting worse. Sure. They're still one of those top-flight teams that win the division. They're going to get into the postseason, and anything can happen in the postseason. We've seen what they can do there.
Absolutely, and also I totally forgot about this name, but Charlie Morton, who again has pitched in the World Series, has been very effective in the playoffs. You bring him into the mix as well. I think Atlanta, you know, we talked about it with the Angels, the mix of young and old. Certain teams understand. It's like Reggie Jackson back in the 70s. He was the straw that stirred the drink. Yeah. I think Freddie Freeman is that straw for the Braves, but there's a nice mix of young talent, and we haven't even mentioned Ronald Acuna's name, by the way, who might be the best young player in baseball, who have the ability to mix things up a little bit. So you've got the young, you've got the old, you've got some pitching depth now, which they didn't have last year when they lost in the NLCS to the Dodgers. They didn't have Charlie Morton, and they didn't have Soroka. You would hope those guys are in a 7-game series against the Dodgers in the NLCS. If you run that series back this year with the guys that the Braves have on their lineup and you know, in the rotation, I think the Braves win that series.
You've got an MVP, you've got a guy who almost won the Triple Crown, and the guy that should end up being the #1 pick in fantasy baseball drafts this year. Why can't you love that offense? Well, that's how he looks at the future bets and how he's going to see those playing out this year. For Jared Smith of Sports Grid, I'm Steve Overmyer. This is Fanalysis.